utilize.
See me.
Opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not WSTU. WSTU does not endorse any products mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU.
The Treasure Coast longest running local talk radio show is on the air. The Treasure Coast Forum, brought to you by Get involved and give us a call with your opinions at 220-9788.
Get in this.
Welcome back, everybody, to WSTU, the Treasure Coast Forum. I'm your host, Reese Gabbett, and we are here with 5 other high school individuals.
Youth and government.
Yes.
Hey, not me.
Youth and government, debate, just politically inclined teenagers.
Exactly.
Thursday afternoon.
Youth of America.
All right, does everybody want to introduce themselves?
Absolutely, we'll go around. I'm Connor Fuchs. I go to South Fork High School.
Sam Crombie, go to Martin County High School.
I'm Lance Fisher. I go to Martin County High School also.
I'm Scott Daniel. I go to Martin County High School.
And I am Nick Hampy, and I go to Martin County High School.
Wow, we are very, very overwhelmed.
Little-
Martin County.
Little county
yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, I mean, normally it's been South Fork,
South Fork, yeah.
so it's kind of good, it kind of gives us some balance, but we'll get some more South Fork students in here.
Oh,
I
yeah.
understand there's a lot of female
Oh, yeah,
South Fork
actually,
students that are in youth and government
Just
too.
before the show, I was talking to a few other YIG members who are really interested in joining the show. They couldn't make it today, but they
Well,
do plan
it's a good thing.
Yeah, 'cause we're packed. But,
You're packed with guys in here.
Yeah, no room. Yeah, we're doubling up as it is now. So.
But yeah, definitely expect more variety for the people that come in here.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to try to go for this year.
Very good.
Mhm.
Excellent. So I know before airtime, you guys were kind of puzzling over what you want to discuss. So what's up? What's up on the agenda?
Well, we never really came to a conclusion. If anybody wants to spit out anything they want to talk about,
I think Sandy. Yeah,
I mean,
he wants to do the debate, right?
Yeah, I mean, the last week has kind of been a slow, news week in terms of politics. But I guess something that I kind of wanted to talk about that's been in the news over the last couple of months has been, the federal government's funding of ICE and essentially the debate over whether or not we should continue to fund ICE or just demolish the organization in its entirety.
Disbanded is what the
Disband.
Democrats
Yeah.
asking.
Hold on, just a quick question.
Much
here, so
much better word.
By implying funding, are you saying that if we don't fund them, that they'll find some other method, or are you saying abolishing ICE?
Abolishing ICE because
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that they don't have any revenue that doesn't come from the government, so they rely on federal funding.
Correct.
So I thought that's an interesting topic to start with. I mean,
All right.
ICE. I think that there's definitely I'll start off. I think that there's definitely great solid points on both sides. The fact that ICE is an enforcement mechanism for illegal immigration in this country, but at the same time we've seen that they have gone to extents that we may not condone. And so the question is, should we abolish ICE in its entirety? Should we subject them to more regulation and scrutiny? What's the situation?
Well, my first question is, what is the present role of ICE in the country? Is it exclusively immigration enforcement, or is it other things as well?
Give us a brief summary about
I mean-
give us some background knowledge.
Yeah, ICE is predominantly used today as illegal immigration enforcement, not on the border, but in the United States when an illegal immigrant that's not in a sanctuary city is tracked down, whether through census, the American Community Survey, or whatever means it may be. ICE essentially enforces two things. One, deportation efforts on illegal immigrants, and also bringing these illegal immigrants to court. Because when a legal immigrant is caught in the United States, they aren't immediately deported. They're kept anywhere from 3 to 6 months detained by ICE or in their house on watch by ICE until they can get a court case in our backlogged court systems for immigration. And so essentially, ICE kind of acts as a supervisor and enforcement mechanism for illegal immigrants and ensuring that they go to court, and that if they are found to be guilty or to have come here illegally, they are deported through our immigration services and through ICE. But again, what's called into question is their tactics, whether or not what they're doing is abusive, if sanctuary cities are infringing on ICE's ability to operate within those operate within sanctuary cities, and as a result they're using more abusive techniques. So it's definitely a complex debate.
You mentioned sanctuary cities. Can you give me a little bit of background on those?
Right. So the problem with sanctuary cities that's brought up in the status quo is that essentially sanctuary cities prevent ICE and federal authority from gaining information about illegal immigrants within the city. So subsequently, if you live within a sanctuary city, you cannot be deported, or it's much more difficult for ICE and other federal organizations to know that you are illegal and that you are within this city and to be deported. The problem with that is two things. One, if there are people who are committing crimes who are illegal immigrants, these states and cities, mostly cities, but sometimes states, they won't give up that information to ICE. But the other problem is that when people commit crimes against illegal immigrants without sanctuary cities, they don't have protection. So if they go to the authorities in a city that isn't sanctuary city, they could be deported just for reporting a crime. So that's the opposite side of it.
So are sanctuary cities just like non-compliance with federal agents? Is that it?
Right,
Or is
yeah.
it something else?
They're not compliant with federal agencies like ICE.
Can you give me a few examples of sanctuary cities in the United States?
So, I mean, I think California just became a sanctuary state, but cities like Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, basically
I think Chicago.
Chicago,
Miami, and
Detroit, Miami,
San Francisco.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, a lot of San Diego, a lot of a lot of cities and some states have these blanket protections on illegal immigrants. And again, it's a problem because on one hand, you have illegal immigrants who may be committing crimes who now we don't know who to deport, and they continue to commit crimes, and it's not really good for anyone. But on the other hand, if an illegal immigrant has a crime committed against them, they can't go to the authorities without the sanctuary city protection. So not just, with ICE and their enforcement mechanisms, but just in general, it's a pretty problematic situation.
So I would say going back to ICE is kind of the token moderate of the group. I believe that we have to have like a set of priorities as a country. It is very notable that there are illegal immigrants coming into the country, and there needs to be some system of enforcement for that. However, I think in the news and from stories across the country, we've seen that ICE is going to the extremes with their methods of
How's that described? to the
deporting.
extreme?
Just as a specific story, I heard in the news not too long ago that there was a group of ICE agents who actually went into a restaurant, had eaten their meal, and then discovered that the chefs were undocumented immigrants and had deported them on the spot. And there's
Deported on the spot?
not necessarily
Detained.
per se, but detained
Detained.
on the spot.
They were
yes,
arrested on the spot, and not very,
Okay.
not a very nice way, essentially.
yes.
They were like dragged out of the restaurant.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think it is very understandable to have an immigration enforcement agency within this country,
Right.
and that abolishing it simply would be ineffective. But I do believe that their tactics do have to be looked at and
Okay.
maybe
So
reestablished.
what is the problem? So there's two really stories going at the same time. Okay, you've got people that are in the country illegally working. Okay, so they're not paying into the system because they're not legally in the system. Okay, they got an employer who is skirting the law because by law he's supposed to hire only legal status people, right? So what would you have? So you're a law enforcement officer, and the laws are pretty clear, right? There's no gray in the law. There is no subjective gray. The law says if you're here illegally, you can't be here. All right? You're a law enforcement officer, and you find through your daily workaday business, you find some people that are here that are not supposed to be. So what are you supposed to do? Because they serve you a good meal, you're supposed to just look the other way?
No, and I
How
don't
does
think
that
that's the point I'm necessarily trying to make.
Okay.
But I do think that these tactics have to be looked at, and the detainment for long periods of time are honestly sometimes inhumane. And I really want to take this perspective from humanity, really, and that though these people are illegal, they are not less deserving of the rights that us Americans receive. And personally, I would think that the first priority on the docket, our agenda, should be to satisfy immigration laws, to secure the border, to allow these illegal immigrants to become citizens. Because I think the end goal of all immigration is to have citizens in the country. We'd like to not have illegal people who are undocumented.
Correct.
And I just have one question here: is that, like, in the case of this, the ICE agents detaining all these chefs or whatever, they're not technically American citizens. So just out of genuine curiosity, how are they treated under the law? How are foreign nationals supposed to be treated by law enforcement?
Is this done under like probable cause or something?
Well, foreign nationals are subject to the same court systems and the same rights as illegal individuals in the United States or people who have citizenship. So technically, they are subject to the same protections. But I think with ICE, we're not seeing that because they are undocumented immigrants. But they are, through the law, they're supposed to be subject to the same conditions.
That was like the whole root of the whole child separation scandal with these illegal parents being separated from their children. Like they'd be detained, and meanwhile the children would have nowhere to go. That would be the same case if a U.S. citizen were detained and the child had nowhere to go. They would be thrown into foster care or somewhere very unideal.
Right, which I think that is a common argument that's brought up. But I think like in both scenarios, like with foster care and with the separation of children, no matter what administration's policy that was, it's still not something like I support. Like it wasn't ideal, and I think that's why the Trump administration pulled back on that policy. From the Obama administration.
Exactly right. The Obama administration, nobody talked about this, was utilizing the very same policy that the Trump administration continued.
Right.
But they never talked about it.
It was just I think that what was being brought up, and it wasn't really well conveyed by mainstream media, is that it was because Trump's zero tolerance policy was sending more children into separation. That was the issue, because beforehand, children would be separated from their families, but it wasn't anywhere near the thousands of children that were being separated because of the zero tolerance policy. And so that's why it became, the ordeal that it ended up becoming.
Well, I think returning to the question of abolishing ICE, at least for me, like abolishment is way too radical. I think most Americans recognize the need that we have for ICE not acting as border controller, border guards, and stuff like that, but as internal immigration enforcement. I think what ICE could benefit from is guidelines, restrictions, definitions, things like that, things that don't necessarily block them or make their job more difficult, but things that specify the protocol and regulations for specific situations, such as if an ICE officer has probable cause, or, how do we define probable cause for ICE officers? Is it the same as regular law enforcement? That's a question. And then when they see people like that, I don't know how they identified these chefs in this restaurant. Is it something like speaking Spanish and being Hispanic in the back of a restaurant? I think that we should have specific guidelines and protocols for ICE, situation-based, and that is my opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that question about how the ICE officers or law enforcement actually ID'd that these people were illegal.
Well, they probably just made a few inquiries.
Yeah. And then they couldn't support it, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that would be probable cause in order for an arrest of any other person accused of a crime.
Right.
All right. I was just making sure. Connor, what is your opinion on this?
Well, I think most people aren't calling for the abolition of ICE. I think that's a little extreme, and I think that most people recognize the fact that something needs to be done, but abolishing ICE is obviously very extreme and it's not going to happen.
So here's a question: Is only ICE allowed to carry out immigration law?
No. So that's actually a really good point. There's another federal organization that works with ICE to detain people, make sure they go to court. It's called ISAP, also known as Intensive Supervision Appearance Program. And essentially ISAP, once an illegal immigrant is identified and detained, ISAP works through much more humane efforts to ensure that they go to court and they monitor them. So that's been one of the largest arguments, is that because ICE is so brutal in their enforcement of different immigration mechanisms, programs like ISAP, instead of detaining them and saying, hey, we're going to keep you in the cell for 6 months until you go into court and then you're deported, instead programs like ISAP that are federally funded, what they do is they place trackers on individuals. They do weekly updates through call and through text just to make sure that they haven't fled the country. And it's a much less intense way, but it's just another enforcement mechanism to ensure people are going to these court cases to eventually be deported. Because a lot of people think, once an illegal immigrant is caught, boom, they're over the border. That's not true. That's a problem with our backlog in our immigration courts, because you have so many people who are being identified as illegal immigrant, so many people in jails being detained by ICE, and so many individuals who are waiting to get into court to see whether or not they can stay in the country.
Right. So why isn't that given to local law enforcement? Isn't that their same job?
It is, and it's given to them. That information is given to them unless it's a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state. Otherwise, that information won't be provided to them. So I mean, local agencies cooperate
Right.
with ICE. Yeah.
Right, so if you're a local law enforcement officer and you come across somebody who's an illegal immigrant, and maybe at a traffic stop type thing, and they don't have proper identification, their driver's license looks falsified, that sort of thing, then they would contact the federal agency, the agents that would be nearest to their post,
Right.
and then they would transfer the custody of those individuals.
I'm a little curious about the sanctuary cities. Aren't they where ICE is not permitted to go, or is it just a place where?
It's not that they're not permitted to go, but
They
the
don't get
cities.
cooperative.
They're just effectively stopped from working there.
Okay, so could
Essentially-
law enforcement then implement deportation like that own cities like
local law.
like local Chicago?
They
Police
can't
Department?
because they don't know who to deport because these cities, those same like municipalities, like the San Francisco Police Department, for example, they would not provide information to agencies that would carry out that deportation or the detaining of illegal immigrants. So agencies like the San Francisco Police Department, for example, wouldn't be providing information about the whereabouts and the locations of illegal immigrants to organizations like ICE and ISAP.
Because they couldn't go in and do anything about it.
Is that
Essentially, yes.
is that a crime?
Yeah, because
Not providing that information, is that a crime?
I mean, it's violating federal law, but I mean,
There's
states
a-
violate federal law all the time.
Right, there's actually a court fight going on right now.
Right.
just over
yeah,
this.
because I mean, imagine if it was for a different crime like drug, like
Well,
just for like
well, that's
anything.
drugs that happens with the legalization of marijuana, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, let's say it was something more extreme, like there's a sanctuary city for I don't want to be extreme, but cocaine, something like that, where
Yeah.
a certain like DEA is
But
allowed
I think
to go
when
in.
you're making comparisons like this, you stray right from the fact that these people are human and that they're not
I agree.
a drug that's being crossed the border, and that once again they do not deserve any less rights than us legal American citizens do.
I just think that it becomes problematic when immigration authorities can't execute their authority in these cities, and you have illegal immigrants who are committing crimes in these
Right.
regions, at rates that may be higher than the general population. I mean, and again, I understand the idea that, if a legal immigrant has a crime committed against them in these cities, they can't necessarily go to authorities, and that just makes, quality of life terrible for them. But there needs to be some balance because you can't just let these, states and these cities get away with protecting the information of illegal immigrants when really you're not protecting them and the people around them legally or illegally coming to this
You're
country.
allowing them to continue a lifestyle that's dangerous for them.
Exactly.
Right. And the whole purpose of this is not to lean on these people because they're here illegally as much as it is to protect the legal residents that are here, that follow our laws and don't do anything wrong. And yet sometimes they get on the bad end of what happens with an illegal.
Right.
There was a case with Philadelphia recently where a young lady was assaulted by somebody who was actually deported a couple of years ago, found his way back, and then did a bad thing to, perfectly legitimate citizen. This is really why this whole debate,
Right.
what got it all ginned up. This type of behavior is what
Right.
gets it ginned up.
But I do still think we need to keep in, mind that people who, because, again, like I may not agree with individuals coming here as undocumented immigrants or overstaying their visas or green cards, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, like, no matter whether or not you're in this country legally or illegally, if you're like a working class family just trying to, support your kids, you shouldn't be afraid to report a crime. And I do think there needs to be some resolution in that area. I don't know what, I'm not a politician, but something.
And I think this issue goes back to like the more overarching just immigration policy because with the Trump administration's effort to secure the border and to build the wall, I think with that, well, as a moderate, I'm not necessarily opposed to securing the border. I think the wall may be excessive, but I can totally understand that sentiment.
Mhm.
But I think once that happens, in a world which it does, I think you absolutely need to provide a path for these undocumented immigrants that are already in the country to citizenship. Because I think overarching, a lot of these problems would be solved if we give these people
Right.
an accessible way to
A reasonable
become
argument. The
citizens.
same argument was made during the Reagan administration. And President Reagan, against advice of counsel and many of the other people in his cabinet, said, okay, fine. So they took the millions of people that were here illegally and they says, we're going to give you a pathway to citizenship. We're just, give you an amnesty. They created an amnesty policy. And the conversation with the Democrats side of Congress was, if you do this, we will work with you to develop an immigration policy, a coherent policy we can all agree to. That never happened. So that is the big fear of the current administration. Looking at the Reagan model, Reagan did what was socially and culturally the right thing to do, with the understanding that we were going to be able to move forward to create a coherent policy, which never came about.
I mean, I think it's
So-
also because, like,
Yeah.
I mean, the Reagan administration, if I'm correct, granted amnesty to the illegal immigrants that were in the country at the time.
Yes.
And then from there, they thought, okay, from here on out, we're going to have more, checks on immigration.
Yeah.
And like what I said last time in the last week's episode is that I just think that the problem now is not necessarily granting amnesty or mass deportation efforts, but it's trying to impact the people who are coming here illegally now. What I talked about is how in Latin America, with countries like Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, people are coming here, majority, 70% are coming here as legal immigrants, but the other 30%, whatever reason it may be, are coming here illegally seeking amnesty. And I think that that's like the fine line that's conflated by both sides on whether or not these people are coming here in search of a better life or if they're just not following their immigration system. That's both sides of the aisle. I think that when you have organizations in these countries that are NGOs from the United States that will essentially pay the way for these individuals to come to the United States legally, whether it be passports, whether it be maybe as far as affordable housing for a month or two, just maybe job placement, just so these people can get on their feet, then you're incentivizing legal immigration. You're de-incentivizing legal immigration because there's no excuse for it because all these programs are open, and you may be making, a solid investment into legal immigrants. I just don't think that, right now, we're in a state of complete partisanship with our immigration problem. And I think that's something as simple as looking at the core problem that both sides can agree on, that not everyone can get here through legal means because it can be difficult. Like, that's a solution we should take. At least that's my take on it.
A point I wanted to make is that you know what? Okay, well, a point I wanted to make is that you can't have a path to citizenship before you have a secured border, because otherwise, if you're not stopping people right at the border, then how are you able to stop further immigration?
And I think I may have mentioned that, but I think along with the securing border policies, the build a wall and improving that infrastructure, I think would have to come with something like that, an easier, a more affordable, accessible path to citizenship.
All right. We'll continue this conversation when we get back, so please stay tuned.
That was a good talk.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a half hour, so what are we going to do for the next 10
You
minutes?
guys want to? Let's get something in line. You guys want to switch it up a bit?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. It's another hot topic. That we debated.
I think everybody pretty much agreed on that. Like,
Yeah.
something needs to be done. Don't know exactly what, but something.
You talk about those shootings in Chicago. The gun control, I guess.
Gun control.
Gun control. So we'll work on it at this point. You have a better idea?
How about that Colorado family where their dad killed his wife and kids and said that they were missing? And finally admitted they killed them.
Jeez.
Did you hear about that guy? There was like two plane hijackings. One guy ran. He was like in the middle of like a domestic dispute. He got out of jail, got into a plane, and drove it right into his house where his wife and daughter was. They survived, but he didn't. And then another one was like a suicide hijack attempt.
Yeah, suicide but plane.
Yeah, he hijacked a plane and then he drove it up. He was like a baggage guy on the ground.
Yeah.
And then they called him like, do you know how to drive? He's like, yeah, I know. I play video games. Then he did a flip and landed in the water.
He crashed on an island.
Did he?
Yeah.
Full
I'm not sure he made it.
Why don't we do local
No, he's
politics? We should do local politics.
What?
Well, Lance has,
I don't know anything.
has
Yeah,
campaign
but
experience
half of
with
us are like-
Warren.
I'm going to do a
I
live
barely knew
broadcast.
anything about ice policies. So.
Now it's time for today's Southeast AgNet Report, brought to you by Everglades Farm Equipment, a family-owned business for the past 50 years with 10 Florida locations, including Fort Pierce, Okeechobee, and Loxahatchee. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You can do this day in history. Your segment, Frank.
Frank?
You can do the this day in history. And just see whatever that is, and just kind of lead a conversation out of that.
Oh, it's a little bit controversial debate topics.
Oh, did you hear about the terrorist compound in New Mexico?
Oh yeah,
I heard briefly about that.
Oh, yeah. That's
and they got out on bail.
I don't know if it's appropriate to say
yeah,
terrorist
liberal
compound.
judge let her out on bail. Well, they'll come back. Yeah.
The compound.
What compound?
It was a compound where they're teaching the kids how to do suicide bombings, school shootings.
For what organization?
I'm not sure if it was any-
Islamic group.
Yeah.
ISIS, right? I heard it was ISIS. I'm not sure.
ISIS. ISIS
Real
the was
family
once.
group, yeah.
ISIS on
All right, when we
the
come back, I'll mention the stream.
on the down.
Yeah. ISIS is now was once.
For sure.
Body found. Okay.
We can talk
Sure we
about
don't.
The Syrian civil war?
Jeff Sessions. His religious task force.
Body found at New
What's
Mexico
Jeff
compound
Force?
identified as missing
Space
Georgia.
Force.
Oh my gosh, I'll still talk about Space Force.
How we're gonna do
What's
it?
Jeff Sessions? That's what you say.
Let me see.
You have to say that.
I'll say it on air.
Is it appropriate to build a Muslim community center near the World Trade Center?
Okay, that was like what 20, 30
I'm on procon.org.
That's just somebody trolling.
Jeff Sessions announced.
There's
Jeff
no-
Sessions announced
no, that's not-
Wednesday that the Department of Justice is creating a religious liberty task force.
Okay, that's good. Everyone in religion should have
I will go against that.
Well, what's
What would
the
that
purpose
entail?
of
Yeah,
it?
what would that-
Yeah, I'm,
there will be.
It sounds like a task force for religious liberty.
Well, nice.
that sounds like a lot of, I don't know.
Sounds like a lot of hoopla, you know what I'm saying?
That's a lot of hoopla. Exactly right. Much ado about nothing.
We'll talk about the Space Force.
We need something.
We'll do the this day in history and just see if that's interesting.
Remember to okay on the way. So you can watch online on the WSTU website.
I have that already written down.
WSTU and then I'll say the phone number. WSTU. Don't just ask how to watch.
All right, one of you guys want to bring us back, or who wants to do that?
How do I bring us back?
Just say welcome.
You're
to-
reading this
you're
top
listening
line.
to-
You want to do it?
You got it? All right, and then hand it back to me and I'll mention
Hey,
the
Campy, this is your redemption for your thing today. I'm kidding.
Wait, so what are we doing? I don't think I know enough about the task force. A task force.
Well, we'll do the this day in history.
Definitely talk about Space Force.
We'll figure out something.
This day, I know that gold was discovered today.
Wow.
Fool's gold.
10 seconds.
What's fool's gold?
I think it's like gold that's like full of people.
And welcome back to WSTU 1450 AM Treasure Coast Forum with your guests Nick, Reese, Connor, Sam, Lance, and Scott.
Very good, Nick.
And
Well
Nice.
Excellent.
And for those of you who wanting to actually watch us at home, you can stream the show on the WSTU website or on our YouTube page.
And also remember, if you want to call in and talk to us about anything, phone number is 220-9788. That's WSTU 9788.
How easy is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Simple.
Yeah.
Seven numbers, not even the conventional
even there
10.
yet.
Only 7.
That's it.
Saves you
Yeah.
3/10 of the time.
Right. Okay, so a couple items on this, and my computer's locked up, so I have to refresh it. But so the items are up on my screen right now. We wanted to do a little bit of this day in history. In 1861, on this date, Union and Confederate forces clashed near Frederickstown in Cooksville, Missouri. All right, I didn't know they were fighting
Nice.
in Missouri, but apparently they were. And in 1863, 2 years later, on this very same day, Union General William S. Rosecrans moves his army from from south Tullahoma, Tennessee, to attack Confederate forces in Chattanooga. And in 1896, gold was discovered in the Klondike of Canada's Yukon Territory, setting off the Klondike Gold Rush. Yes.
Wow.
And in 1914, this is part of World War I, Liège, Belgium falls to the German army during World War
Travesty.
I. And in 1945, on this date, Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright, who was taken prisoner by the Japanese on Cord, Coregidor, on May 6th in 1942, was released from the POW camp in Manchuria by U.S. troops, I guess so. Very good.
It's been a very good day in history.
Right, and the last item, in 1965 on this date, the Watts riots end in south central Los Angeles after 6 days.
What were the Watts riots?
It was,
Glad
if
you
you were
asked.
around during the 60s, you would know. It felt like Los Angeles was burning to the ground. It was a big to do.
Speaking of riots, aren't
Yeah.
we approaching an anniversary of one soon enough? The Charlottesville.
Oh yeah, Charlottesville.
That was a year
Ooh, we have a
ago.
caller. Wow, yeah, I didn't know that Charlottesville was only a year ago. That's very interesting. Actually, I think like a week ago, wasn't there some protest with
All
like
right,
I
you
think
ready?
a couple dozen
Okay, well,
uh,
we'll put you
white
on. Stand by.
supremacists?
They met a large resistance, a very big counter protesting force. I believe.
Interesting. I wonder where was that?
I'm not.
DC?
Well, I want to hear in your opinions, all of you. Do you think this state of our country in terms of division is any better now than it was a year ago?
Yeah, we got to get headphones. All right, we got to pass around some headphones for everybody. Well, we got Bob on the line anyway, so that those of you with headphones, see if you can share them with your neighbors, so everybody can hear what's going
Oh,
on.
Bob.
All right, Bob.
Great. We're doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a good question.
Good
I'm
one.
gonna put in for that. No.
That's why it works so well.
Yeah, they clean up after themselves and everything. It's pretty good. Right. Well, one of the things that, yeah, I sort of being interrupt you, but one of the things that ICE does that many people haven't touched on, they're also very much involved with terrorism, spotting terrorists, and you know, collecting those people that are here, you know, as terrorists too. So they work with other federal agencies.
Did not know that.
Oh, jeez. All right.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because you want to help people out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that the question that we have to ask ourselves is why are people coming here illegally? And I think, I mean, what I believe is that American citizenship has been inaccessible for too many people.
I think it's been too accessible. Has been the problem, and people just I think the problem is people figure if they can make it over the border, they're here. They'll figure it out.
And I mean, it's like you want beneficial immigration as well, like economically beneficial. And I mean, I think a pathway to citizenship could possibly allow for those who are illegal currently and not paying taxes to contribute to society. And then those who aren't, we would be able to deal with. But like, it's a question of, because there's only so much of our economic prosperity that can go around, right? Yeah, I mean, I think what you've got is, I think there's probably something to be said for a path to citizenship. But you can only do that after you get border security, taken care of. Like, we get all of our ducks in the row, as far as that goes. Because otherwise, we're not going to be able to make sure that the people who come are going to be able to contribute to the system. And a lot of the illegal immigrants that people bring up in debates like this they say they're working, they're contributing to society. Well, if we provide a mechanism through which they would be allowed to do that, then I think the problems on both sides of the aisle would be solved.
And I'd just like to add that I don't necessarily believe that assimilation is the goal of immigration. I know that we've called America the melting pot of the world, really.
How can we interact with each other if we don't assimilate?
Well, I believe that we should take more of the stance that we should celebrate differences rather than blend everyone together into one culture. Just as there's different.
So if there's 6 different languages, how does that work?
Well, I don't think Lance means because I think that learning something like English, I wouldn't really consider that assimilation. I think that's like a necessary skill to thrive in the United States.
We don't even have a law on the books that says that English is the spoken language in the United States.
Because there's many different spoken languages, so it's like diverse.
I would like to tell a personal anecdote on this story.
Let's hear it.
I have a very wonderful example here. Is in 7th grade civics, I remember going to school one day, learning that my teacher said that America is a salad bowl, not a melting pot. So I remember I went home and I told my dad that my teacher called America a salad bowl. And my dad was furious. My dad was furious because he believes, and I almost have to agree with him here, that America is a melting pot. I think that assimilation is a good thing. I think that the preservation of cultures is a good thing as well. things like Little Italy, Little China, cultural enclaves in our country, they all bring something very valuable in these unique cultures.
Exactly.
But the thing that makes America great, the thing that makes America the country it is today, is assimilation. The fact that we have countries in Europe that are majority, like Sweden, Scandinavian countries that are almost very predominantly white and other things like that. Versus America is a country built on a long, long history of diversity. And the thing that makes all these disparate groups, all these different identities, ethnicities, everything from our history so good and such an amazing contributions to our country is assimilation. The fact that we are all Americans and we all share that cultural glue.
Everybody will be, all right. All right, thanks, Bob. All right, we're gonna take this as an opportunity to go on break, and we thank Bob for calling in, and if you want to give us a call at 220-9788. We'll be right back.
So Bob's an interesting guy.
I just told Dylan to call in.
When he said,
How many time do we have left?
We're gonna have
15 minutes.
what
What did you say right before we began? Well, I think the highlight is that.
Wait, what did he say?
I didn't hear a single thing Bob said, but I should start coming with and talk about tequila.
Or we should get rid of the colors and everybody make these darker people.
What did he say about African Americans?
He's like, I've got a
Did you hear what he
message.
said?
I've got-
Oh my God.
I've got a message to minorities, specifically all African Americans. Like, no.
He said that? Okay, blacklisted, done.
Bob,
Jesus Christ,
Bob,
Bob.
you can't say that.
Bob.
No, I mean he was on the line. He was on the line.
You know, but still,
He was on the
I
line.
got a message for all those African
Oh
Americans.
my God, he said that. I'm happy to have my headphones. It's a little bit of a whoopsie.
That was some good talk.
That was some great talk.
Before Bob.
Space Force.
Space Force.
Wait, what were you going to say? Nick, what were you asking us when Bob
It's
called?
very faint, but it's audio.
What you were like, oh, let me ask, let me pose you gentlemen a question. You were going to say something.
Compared to a year ago.
Yeah, you play. Oh yeah, there it is.
Nick, your speech at the end was beautiful.
Yeah, that was a great speech.
Yeah, really cranked it up for you.
Yeah.
Channel 3.
Assimilation.
What's that? You hear something?
And my father was furious. My father, Ed Campy, commissioner of Martin County, furious, very furious. Ed Campy, 2020, very furious about the sound ball.
Ed Campy, 2020, great guy. Vote for him. He was furious.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
Everybody needs one of those.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's she doing?
What a cutie.
Good job, guys. Hey, thanks.
Next time we gotta get like half kind of thing.
Yeah.
Instead of one on
Poor Lance is getting beat up over here. Well, no, Lance, you're doing a fantastic
Yeah,
job.
Lance, you're doing really good. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, I think Nicole wants to come next time. That'll be fun. Oh wait,
So-
Nick, can you get him to come next
that
time?
one time. We gotta get some more
software levels.
I'm going.
liberals in general.
Yeah, we'll come.
I want to see Emily Williams on one side and Connor on the other and just duke it out. Yep.
Interesting. It's like, have any of you guys heard of Memory TV?
What?
Oh yeah.
What?
It's like this thing where they translate all the Arab news shows in English. The things they say and just
What's it called?
Memory
TV.
MEMRI TV.
It's like Fox, from what I can understand, it's kind of like Fox News where they'll have like pundits come on there to debate stuff, but it gets a lot more heated. It's really a good time.
Two dudes screaming in the
Oh,
Arabic.
oh yeah.
Oh, they lift up a desk.
Yeah.
They dismantled an entire desk.
Hey, what are we talking about next?
Parts are falling off the plane.
You got 30 seconds to decide.
Nick, I'll let you talk about Space Force. I'll bring us in.
Space Force?
Let's already talk about them.
That's what I thought so. Because I'll give you a little bit of backstory about it.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
About
I'm
what?
looking up.
Space Force. Diagnostic. It just go off. Snap. Snap on these Mr. Bob. Prejudice bombs.
Welcome back, everybody, to WSTU, the Treasure Coast Forum. I'm here with all my friends.
Cohorts
Just
on
some friends,
crime.
you know?
We're friends.
Yeah, we're
That's so
of course,
sweet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
Beautiful.
we wanted to maybe go into maybe a little more lighthearted topic and just give our thoughts about it. We're going to talk about Space Force.
Space Force.
yes.
This is something I'm actually
Space Force.
very excited about.
Space Force.
So-
All right, Nick, give us your thoughts.
I think like ever since last year, I'd heard there's some debate. There's space is kind of like obviously the final frontier in all regards, science, technology, especially the
Such a cliche.
Thank you. But what I was saying was, for a long time, space has been a demilitarized area. We can't have nukes there because of international treaties, and for good reason too. But there's been reconnaissance, spy things like that. And it's always been kind of an issue in the American Armed Forces as to whose domain is space. Is it the Air Force? Because, space is kind of just above the sky. Or is it the Navy, the historical power? And as of last year, there had been talk about creating a new branch of the military, the Space Force. And I think in recent news, we've been hearing that this is actually coming to light. And I think Pence himself said that by 2020, we were going to have a Space Force.
I guess that's like one of the big campaign promises of the Trump administration, the Space Force.
Space Force. And
I'm excited.
there are so many questions we have to ask about the Space Force, and there's so much debate to be had. It's a new frontier.
So,
Well,
yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of like considered a joke and kind of like a meme, but in reality, there's a lot of practical application having a Space Force. Kind of like you were talking about, different types of technology, whether it be satellites, things that run our entire nation, like our grid and our, communication services.
There's a lot of money up there.
Exactly. And, it sounds really stupid, but there's growing technology of lasers in space by like the Chinese government that, that's probably the worst way I can phrase it. But essentially,
Chemtrails.
but there is growing scarcity within space,
a question I
and we
have,
must do something about it right now.
a question I have
Go
is,
on, Nick.
what would be the role of the Space Force? So like,
Protect space.
Aliens.
I mean, no, like, are we talking about as Sam was saying, like, we put lasers and missiles on our space stations and go fly them over to the Chinese space station and blow it up?
No,
We're talking
man,
about,
no. We're going over to
That'd
an
be pretty
asteroid, and we're finding minerals on there.
I'm thinking we need to keep it's the illegal aliens that are the
Oh,
situation with.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Reese, that's a silly comment.
The alien aliens.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I have a legit question here. What is the need to create a new branch of the military as the Space Force, or rather, why don't we just fund NASA more?
Because
They've been-
NASA is
I
a
think
terrible
the
public
fact-
corporation. They do
because
nothing to help the United
NASA
States.
is not they're a civilian
Defense.
agency. They're a civilian agency. Oh, whoops.
I don't think that the Space Force is like an entirely new division. I heard it was going to be a subdivision of the Air Force.
I think it's a new division.
No,
It's
it's
a
entirely new branch.
The sixth branch of the military.
Yeah,
I think also because it's like NASA's like more civilian,
So
and
this-
also NASA's terrible at using taxpayer resources, and SpaceX, a private corporation,
well,
is much
we have to
better at
remember,
doing
you can't
that.
just totally
So-
defame NASA.
No, I'll defame
I mean,
NASA.
no.
NASA's-
I will stand up to NASA's defense here because at one point in our history, the '60s specifically, NASA's budget. I don't know if you realize this, but it was something like 5% of the entire GDP. Of the
Yeah,
United
it's
States.
not in the space race.
No, during the most of the towards the end, they really ginned it up to 4%, but it was about 1/4 of 1% is all they spent.
Yeah, nowadays.
Which were part of their, annual budget.
What is the
Not a whole
percentage of our
lot.
GDP that we what
Towards
is
the military.
yeah.
Well, I
I
can't
think
speak
it's
off
about
of percent, but I know the number itself is in 500 something billion, which is more than all of the other countries in the world combined.
How much should we spend on
Not all
NASA
the
right
other-
now? How much should we spend on NASA?
Much less.
Yeah,
than
I understand.
500
I understand
billion.
that, but
But I mean, I guess people always say that the military, especially in times of peace, in America's military is a pride point of this country for sure. But like creating this new branch and taking off that massive budget for something that NASA isn't specifically designed to do, I think, in my opinion, is a good idea. Now, whether we should give that to the Navy or the Air Force is another question, because I know that we have like all the academies and stuff. So just the concept
Space Force
of
Academy.
a Space Force
Oh.
Academy.
maybe like space.
So
Jam.
according
cadets.
according to the Congressional Budget Office, the U.S. government in the last administration spent about $590 billion in defense, made up about 15% of our federal spending
That's pretty
annually. That's a lot of money.
So do you
do we
guys think-
that
Maybe we can cut some like unnecessary funding within other branches and put that towards the Space Force.
What were you asking,
So,
Connor?
tell that to the other branches. Though. I'm
Yeah.
sure they go.
yeah,
Yeah, because Coast Guard's really, protecting us
Oh,
on the
Sam,
coast.
don't go.
Hey.
I'm sorry.
I'm kidding. I'm a fan of the Coast Guard.
I'll let Lance go first. Lance, what were you?
Well, I guess my question is do we think that advocating more money to the military is going to become problematic? And
Well,
when do we prioritize the citizens
now Lance.
Well,
over?
now Lance.
That's inherent.
Are
That's
we-
my question.
Is this
That's the point of defense.
is the creation of the Space Force mandating new funds, or is it just reallocation? Because I mean, reallocation will turn some heads in Washington and the Pentagon. I would tell you that for sure. Because all all these really old historical branches of the military, Air Force been around since the 40s, and all the other ones before that, hundreds of years. Just the idea of the Space Force right now obviously sounds, I'm gonna be pretty honest, pretty corny, but the potential that Space Force has in the future and all of that is immense, and I think that's where
I think that if we just reallocate our military budget, I think we're kind of unanimous with our agreement with the Space
All right,
Force.
Okay.
And defunding NASA, right, everyone? Okay.
Just go Space Force,
Space
Yeah,
Force.
just Space Force, and then we'll have just
Maybe like a Mars Force once Elon Musk gets us to Mars.
yeah. We'll just go to Mars, do that.
Well, maybe
Fight
that's
the
a topic-
Martians.
That's a topic for next
Yeah.
week.
Go Space Force.
We'll take a ride in the next Tesla to Mars. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. It was a great show, and I look forward to seeing you next week here on the
Absolutely.
Treasure Goes Forward.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
listeners. See you next time.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yay.
That was a good show.
That was fun. I like the Space Force talk.
I'm kidding. There's literally China has space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Space lasers.
Bring some of these chairs back over there.
Yeah, we got it.
Is this one in here?
Yeah, let me grab